What's up, guys? Welcome to Triple H Home Improvement. Today we're going to be painting. This is what I've been doing for over 20 years now, so it's my specialty, so hopefully I can teach you something. I'm going to have a couple little tips and tricks or painting hacks or whatever throughout this video, so pay attention. At the end of the video, I'll even show you how to fix a screen that got some paint on it, or accidentally get a little caulk on a black screen, like a window screen, or even your screen in porch or something. If you get some paint on there, I'll show you how to make that disappear. But to get started, first tip is if you're installing the trim, go ahead and prime it and put a coat of paint on it before you even cut it and put it up. Because that right there saved me a ton of time. Because now all I have to do, after I caulked it and puttied the holes, all I have to do is lightly sand it. I usually prefer like a 220 grit sandpaper, but today I've got some worn out 150 sheetrock paper, but it's pretty much worn down to about a 220. But when you're sanding, you don't want to try to sand it all the way down to bare wood again. You just want to go over it mainly on the little putty places and use your hand and feel. You can feel where it needs to be sanded. Go ahead and sand everything nice and thoroughly, really lightly. Like I said, we're not trying to put a lot of pressure on it. We're just being nice and thorough. Use your hand. It'll feel a lot smoother. You'll feel the difference between where you sanded and where you didn't sand. Always sand with the grain. The wood grain's going this way, so that's the way I'm sanding. You don't want to sand up and down like this, because then you're going against the grain. Same way with when you're painting it. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to paint brush strokes go with the grain. Okay, let's see here. Here's a little painting hack for you. Well, first, after we sand it, I've got this rag soaked in some denatured alcohol. You probably hear me talk about denatured alcohol a lot in my videos because it's a really good tool for a painter. It's good for all kinds of stuff. It cleans stuff and evaporates quickly. We've got to wipe all the dust off of this that we just sanded, because we don't want that getting in our paint and making it look crappy. And I like using denatured alcohol because when you're wiping this dust off, you're not leaving a bunch of water. If you just made your rag wet or whatever, if you use water, that's fine. You can use a damp rag, but this stuff evaporates very, very fast. It doesn't leave any kind of oily residue on it. And that's why I use it for this. I also use it for a lot of other things, like cleaning paint off of things that it's not supposed to be on. But, okay. Here's a cool little painting hack for you. Always strain your paint when you're painting trim or walls. Usually it's always a good idea, because sometimes you get dried up paint, or in this case, while I was painting this outside, I had it in a 5-gallon bucket with a little weeding roller, and I was rolling these boards and brushing them, and might have been dust and leaves or whatever get in it. Who knows? It kind of gets dry when it's sitting in the sun, so it'll get like a skim. It'll skim over the top, and then we call that guts because you got dried paint in the wet paint, and it's nasty, and it's a pain. So it's always good to use a strainer. And this is a 5-gallon strainer. They make 1-gallon strainers. They also make some little cardboard things, but this has been used a couple of times. It's got a couple holes in it or whatever. But wrap it over your bucket. Dump as much paint in there as you can, or whatever you're going to be using. I don't have a whole lot of paint left, so. And if you look, you can see all the clumps, how clumpy it is. That's why I'm straining it. Usually when you first buy a gallon of paint, it's not going to be this nasty and clumpy, but it's always still a good idea to strain it, especially when you're painting trim. Always, 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 when you pour paint up, clean the inside of this rim. This one's been used several times, so it's kind of getting nasty anyway, but if you don't, this this lid is not going to want to go back on there very good, and it'll be harder to get off when you want to use it next time. So always clean that. Now, when we're straining this, you could get like a rubber glove and just use your hand and then pull it through. Or if you're doing it outside by a water hose, you could do that. But I'm gonna show you another way in case you don't want to get paint on your hands. You can use like an old paint stick, or in this case, I couldn't find a paint stick, but I got some old shims, some leftover shims. So I'm just gonna kind of sandwich it like this and just pull it through. Keep it in the bucket. We don't want to make a mess. I don't want to slingshot this thing across the room and sling paint either. So be very gentle with it. And then all that paint that come off there is nice and good paint. Now, I've got a bucket of water here. I'm just going to dunk that down in there. That way I can wash that out later. So that's painter hack, or a painting hack number one for this video, I guess. So now that our paint's all nice and clean and strained, now we can get to the fun part. Actually applying the paint to the wood or trim or whatever you have. And if you come over here, I'm gonna start. I'll show you why I'm gonna start on these sides. It's because there's still raw wood on that. If you come around and take a look, that's where I cut the board. So I cut the boards after I painted them. So on these end pieces, up top and bottom, they're kind of raw wood. So this particular paint should be paint and primer in one, but I'm gonna need to put 2 coats on there. So I'm gonna put a coat on all these 4 corners so that it'll be drying while I'm painting the inside of the frame. And you want to start out here on this edge and work your way to the drywall when you're painting these edges. And another thing, when you do that, go ahead and wipe this off, because you're going to get paint buildup over here and over here, and it's going to look ugly once that dries and then you try to paint over. So I'm just going to go ahead and wipe those corners on these edges. Do the same thing on this side. This is my favorite painter trick ever. It's painter hack number 2 for this video. Always have a putty knife. If you don't have a putty knife, you can use a pocket knife and wrap the rag around your pocket knife and do the same thing, but I like using the putty knife. It works better. Get your rag. You can use just a damp cloth. Wrap it around your putty knife like this. All right, we're gonna put the putty knife. Just wrap the rag around it like that. You got a nice flat edge here. Now, I got a little extra paint on the sheetrock and I didn't want to. There you go. That's how you clean up those lines. That's how you make it look like a professional, even though you make mistakes. We all do. But that is my favorite painter's trick right there. That's the best one that I know of. Once you get those edges done, and you might not have to do that, well, however you're painting, but depending on what you're doing, how you're doing it. But when I'm painting trim like this, I always want to start on the inside and work my way out. But I like to do the face very last, because that's what you're really going to see. So I'm going to paint this all the way around, and then I'm going to paint these edges, put a second coat on those, and then I'm going to do the face last and make that nice and pretty. So let's go ahead and start at the top. Use a good brush too. Don't buy a cheap, crappy throwaway brush. I mean, if you want to, that's your business. But if you see how you get in these corners right here, I just take my brush and I push the tip of that paintbrush in there. And just very steadily, nice and easy. Nice, straight, even strokes. When you're loading your paintbrush, this is what I like to do. I don't scrape all the paint off of there, usually. You just take the brush, dip it in there. You got about that much paint on it. Just tap it on the sides like this. Especially if you're painting walls. That's how I do it, because you want a lot of paintbrush. a lot of paint on your brush. But in this case, paint and trim like this, I usually just rake off one side. I leave a lot of paint on that side. And then I just kind of spread it on there. Make sure it's all even. Make sure there aren't any runs, or make sure you didn't get any paint on here, all that good stuff. Like I said, I'm gonna come back with a rag and just get that paint off of here, that excess paint off the face, because it's gonna build up and it's gonna dry by the time you get the paint to that, or get paint on it. So you don't want that, it looks ugly. But one more time on the corners, you can do it this way and push it up in there, or you can do it this way. However, but the basic is you start out here and you kind of twist and you can push. See how I'm pushing those bristles in there, into that corner? You can just kind of push them right up in there and then come down. Like I said, always keep these handy. It's a lifesaver. Clean it right up while it's wet. Don't let it dry and then try to come back and clean it. It's not going to be as easy. All right, now I'm going to come back and paint this edge. Now that the inside's all done, I'm going to paint this edge and then the face. When you're painting these edges, you don't want too much paint on your brush. Just kind of dunk it and rake it off. You're going to kind of come in at a 45. Actually, you're going to put your bristles on there like this. And you're going to bend it almost like a 45 and just drag it down. You're not putting a lot of pressure. Very, very lightly. Nice and even. Kind of long strokes. That way you don't get those wavy lines. But just kind of look it over. And sometimes, if you're looking directly at it, you might not see any flaws. Look at it at an angle. Use the lighting, because you'll see the light coming off and it makes a glare, and you can kind of look it up and down at different angles, and then you might see a run that you didn't see before, or just an imperfection or something that you want to fix, or even a missed spot. Like you'll see like a dry spot where it's not shiny, and then you realize you missed a spot. So we want to keep it nice and consistent, make sure we're putting a good even coat over all of it. We don't want to miss any spots, because this is the final coat. When you're painting across this piece, make sure your bristles don't come down into that piece. If they do, just kind of fix it. Keep everything going the same, you know, with the wood grain like it should be. Painted, and we've accomplished something. So, now the window is all done. If you didn't watch my previous videos, you know, I did a video on removing an old window and replacing it with a new one, and that's what we did here. And then another video on how we cased it out with the trim, and then finally getting to the painting. Next, we're going to put some blinds up. I've got a lot of projects I need to do in this house. We've got to paint some ceilings. We've got to paint some walls. We've had this house for about 6 years. We've got 3 kids, a dog and a cat. So it's got some wear and tear, and it's time to start painting stuff again. So stay tuned. Watch some more videos about how to paint like a professional. Oh yeah, one more thing. I promised you I'll show you a cool painting hack on how to get some paint off of a black screen. So I'll be right back. All right, guys. If you look real close there, you can kind of see it. I've got some caulk or something on that screen there, and it's ugly, and I need to fix it. So I'm going to show you a little trick on how to do that. So normally I would have a lid for this spray can. It's just black spray paint. I probably threw the lid away somewhere, because I'm like that, I'm an idiot. But you spray this black spray paint in the lid, or in this case I've got a paper plate, and just get enough of that black. Usually like some flat black is good. There's not much of this left. There we go. All you need is a little bit, and a Q-tip, because if I spray it on here, it's just going to go through and it's going to get on the glass. I don't want it all over the glass, so we're just going to dab the Q-tip in it. And we're going to dab that screen where it's got that white paint or caulk or something on it. We're just going to do that until it's gone, until you can't see it anymore. We don't want to rub it because we don't want to fill in the holes. We don't want to make a, I'm not trying to fill in these holes and make a boat out of it or anything. We just want to make that white disappear. And there it is. Once that dries, especially if it's like a nice flat, you won't see it. Of course, you can see it now because you got a glare. It's still wet, but make sure you use like a flat and black. But that looks way better from here. You can't even tell that there was any caulk on it. Well, now you have it. Now you know how to get rid of ugly paint on a black screen, whether it's your screen and porch or your window screen or whatever it might be. It's a cool little trick I learned over the years, and I figured I'd share it with you guys.